Welcome to Chasing Impact, Not Sales, where heart meets hustle, strategy meets service, and selling feels good again. I'm your host, Mandy Minitello. Let's go. Hey, back again, and super looking forward to today's chat. Today, we're going to talk about the 3 words that have become synonymous with my training, have become the heart and soul of my coursework and my coaching. My clients definitely know these 3 words. They use them back at me once they've become integrated into their system, and they know exactly what it means. And after this session, this podcast, so will you. Today, we're going to talk about not being weird. And this episode is titled, Don't Be Weird. Let's go. So, don't be weird is a phrase that I coined when I first started coaching and realized that it meant so much more than just those 3 words, that now it's the title of my upcoming book. It's the at the base and the core of everything that I teach and train. And it's just so simple to remember, but it takes you a very long way when it comes to sales. What don't be weird comes down to is understanding basic psychology, basic human functioning, right? The psychology of the buyer and the psychology of the seller, and just what makes sense. And understanding that basic psychology and just following the cue of what makes sense is going to close so many more sales for you than any curated script ever could. And it's just understanding what it means to be in that relationship that is built when you're in the process of a sale. When I start coaching with somebody in our very first session, or if I do a group session with people, I often ask, when I say sales, what do you think of? And then I give them time to process that thought. What do you think of when I say sales? And they'll journal and share their thoughts with me. And I always get, different versions of the same thing, right? And you can imagine what that is. But what I really am thinking as I'm getting the answers to these questions, and I already know what the answers are going to be before they're even told to me, but what I'm really getting at the core of is, again, basic human psychology. Why does it matter what you think of when I say sales? Why does that matter? If I talk to somebody and they share with me their occupation and they tell me that they're a air conditioning repair person, or they're a pastor or a teacher, or they're in real estate investment or a doctor or whatever, it doesn't matter what feelings I might have about that. It doesn't matter in my gut anything about their occupation. So, why, when it comes to sales, do we have feelings? That's the real question. Let's go back to those occupations. What did I say? Air conditioning repairman, pastor, teacher, real estate, doctor. The process of what those people do, regardless of industry, the process can be equated to the exact process that any salesperson does as well. You see, true sales is not a transaction, right? It is not closing. True sales is not some magical script that you're going to whip out, or a list, a sequence of perfectly posed questions that will equate to some magical answer, or a curated speech with a magical CTA at the end. Like, that's not sales. Sales is not that transaction. Sales is the process. The process of establishing a relationship with someone, developing trust with them, presenting a solution to an issue if it makes sense, and then giving them the opportunity to accept. It's that process. But the secret to that process is the three words that will make or break the relationship, which is just don't be weird. Right? In an effort to illustrate this in a way that most, if not everyone, will understand and have a connection to. Let's say you're going out on a first date with someone and you meet somewhere, you meet at a coffee shop, a restaurant, a movie theater, whatever, all you're thinking about is, I don't want them to think I'm weird, right? Like you want to create a relationship with them, see if it feels good, develop some trust, and see where it goes. And then you'll go and do the next thing that makes sense, right? So if you meet someone for the first time and they're like, hi, nice to meet you. Would you like to get married today? Like, that's a little weird. Or they're like, nice to meet you. Um, let's go meet my parents right now. That's a little weird, right? Or even if they're just like, hey, nice to meet you. We're at this coffee shop because we were going to have coffee together, but you did bring your overnight bag with bathing suit and everything else because I'd like to go to Hawaii for the weekend. Let's go. That's a little weird. Like in these scenarios, are you thinking, wow, that's really romantic. I really like this guy. I trust them so much. No, you're thinking, whoa, they're a little bit weird. And that was a weird thing to say, or it's a weird thing to do, or it doesn't feel right. It's like they jumped to the end of the movie and skipped all the middle part. And guess what happens in the middle part? The relationship is built, the trust is formed. It's a process. But so often, when we meet someone that we think is our ideal client or ideal customer, we do exactly that. And what we come off as is weird. Okay. If you meet someone and you're like, okay, my ideal customer is X, Y, and bonus if they're also Z, right? And you meet someone and they are X, Y, and Z. You're like, hot damn, here we go. And you ask them if they brought their bag for Hawaii because you're on your way and they're going with you. And they're going to be like, check please. And where is the nearest exit? And you will not see them again or hear from them again. And you're like, but what happened? They were X, Y, and Z. And I have done all of this market research and I've done all of these things to know exactly who my ideal client is. And they were them. So what happened? My whole system must be broken. I don't have the right script. I need that perfect question. And they're calling up Mandy and saying, I need help. My whole sales system is broken. And we go back and we look. And I was like, well, you were weird. And I know you're saying to me, it cannot be that simple. It is that simple. But we make it much more difficult than it needs to be, especially in today's sales culture. Because I just gave you the example of a date, and you're like, well, no one would ever do that. Hopefully, you're right. Okay. Hopefully, people have more sense of how not to be weird when they meet someone for a date. Let's change the scenario and you meet someone for a networking call or a networking face to face, right? They might be a potential client. You've arranged to have a luncheon, a coffee chat, could be a Zoom call, whatever it is, and you meet with them. it seems that in today's world, the stuff that makes sense when you're on a date slightly goes out the window when you're in a networking situation. If you're at a conference or a coffee or a luncheon or a Zoom call or coffee chat or whatever, people lose a little bit of that knowledge of like how not to be weird. Like their awareness is a little dulled, right? It's not too bad when you're face to face because you have to look at them in the face. So you get a little bit of that like not weird stuff at the beginning, right? So it's tell me about yourself, what are you looking for, you know, all of these things, right? And you get that out of the way. And we talk about when I'm talking to people about how to create that relationship, I do work with them on like how do you ask pointed, targeted questions. But at the base of everything is not being weird, not jumping to the end of the movie, not skipping over the relationship building. And people, it's not going to happen in 5 minutes. It's likely not going to happen in one instance, whether that be a call or a luncheon or whatever. It takes a little time. And the secret to sales is understanding that it's a process, not a transaction, and that the process doesn't have a set timeline. I could meet one ideal client and they're ready to become a client that day. I can meet another ideal client and they might be ready in 2 weeks. I can meet someone where their buying timeline is years. And that's part of the process. And that's part of the keeping track of data. And that's all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, the sale is made at the end of the movie, at the end of the relationship building, at the end of after creating that trust factor. And all along the way, it's based on not being weird. Now, like I said, that understanding, that basic awareness, social awareness of the psychology that's happening here, it gets a little dulled when you're in a face to face situation. It gets a lot dulled when you're in DMs, which is such like a huge part of the sales culture and climate these days. If you're in sales, likely at least some, if not all of your sales are made on social media. You're in the DMs, you are making connections, you're friending people, you're doing that whole thing, regardless of platform. You're doing at least some of that relationship building behind a keyboard. And this is when people like just lose all sense of what makes sense. And this is where the majority of my coaching comes in when people show me their DMs and I was like, what am I going to say? And if you have worked with me for any period of time, if I say, what am I going to say? You're like, oh crap. She's going to say I'm weird. Because that's what it comes down to when I look at people's DMs. I'm like, oh my gosh. Hi, if I sent you this webinar, would you take a look and give me your opinion? How about, hi, how are you? Make a connection to where you know this person from. So often people jump, not like when you're in person, you might jump from, hi, how are you? Tell me about yourself to the end of the movie. When you're in a DM, it's literally like you feel like within that first DM, you need to ask that you need to take them to Hawaii because you targeted them. You have recognized that they're your ideal client. You have already done the research, gone down the rabbit hole, found all the information that LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and their website and everything could possibly tell you. And you've already determined that they are your 100% qualified client and you need them to work with you today, or they need your product now. Here's the problem. They don't know you've done all that research. They don't know you've been down the rabbit hole. They may not even know who you are, what service you provide, what products you have available, and why they would even need any of that. That is all stuff that is conveyed in the relationship building as you're creating that trust. But you took all of that for granted and said, hey, if I send you this thing, would you? Or, hey, I see that you have X, Y, and Z. I've got a solution for you. Okay, now I'm not going to say there's not those unicorns out there that might be like, oh my God, where have you been my whole life? Yes. And they hit the button. But more people are going to be like, ick to that than the people who are going to be like, thank you. You are the answer to my prayers. Where have you been? Right. And so, as long as you've got people where their natural reaction is ick, guess what? Their reaction might as well be, wow, you're weird, block. And you just lost your ideal client who was X, Y, and Z, who is completely qualified to work with you because you jumped right to the end because you were weird. You need to take the time, build the relationship. So, what does that look like? Don't invite them to Hawaii. Don't tell them first message that I'm going to send you a webinar or, you know, the perfectly scripted if I would you. There was a time when that stuff worked because there was a time when they weren't so saturated with people being weird. But now I know you feel me when as soon as you see a DM from someone you don't already know, you're like, here we go. What are they selling me? Right? You're not like, I wonder if they're the solution to my problem. Or, man, where have they been my whole life? That's not what people are saying. That's not what you're saying on the first date. Where have you been my whole life? If they're being weird. But if they're developing a relationship and speaking your language and telling you about themselves and what they're looking for, what they have to offer the world, and then they ask you what you're looking for and what you have to offer the world, and you're creating that relationship, then you will go home from that first date and say, wow, where have they been my whole life? I can't wait to see them the next time. And that next time is not at the altar. It's not at his parents' house, probably. And it's probably not in Hawaii. That next step is a baby step. Coffee again, a movie, out to dinner, over to their house where they're going to make dinner. What, a local concert. I don't know. But it's something that makes sense. That's the key. Something that makes sense. That's not weird. So in sales, when you're in the DMs or you're in a networking situation or you're reaching out, don't ask them to the next thing that doesn't make sense. Sales is a process. All that process is a series of best next steps. What makes sense next? And your whole role is to create a relationship with qualified people to get them from one step to the next step. That next step could be if you have an upcoming training that they can come to, or would they subscribe to your newsletter, or would they like this freebie that you have to offer, or I would like to talk again. When is a good time? Whatever makes sense for the next thing. And the key to knowing what makes sense and what the next thing is that you should invite them to is really, really knowing your audience. This is number one. When you are a business owner, a founder, whatever, you have to know your audience. You have to know your people, know what they need, know what they want. Those could be two different things. Know what they dream of. What are they wishing for? Depending on their language, could be what are they praying for, wishing for, manifesting, hoping for, their birthday candle blowout wish, whatever it is. And what do they fear? What are they fearful of? What is it that keeps them up at night? What is it that has them afraid? And when you truly know those things, and then you meet someone, build that relationship, speak their language, and invite them to the next thing that makes sense. Don't jump to the end of the movie. Invite them to the thing that makes sense, and then follow them along with the process. Keep track of where they are. Keep track of what they say. It's a whole nother podcast episode, but like you'll know when they're ready for that final transaction, that closing, right? Which is part of the process, but it's not the whole thing. And you'll know if they're not qualified for you. Not everyone is. Not everyone's meant to be your client or your customer. But all along the way, you will never have an empty pipeline. You will never not have that next person as long as you are healthy in an understanding of the basic psychology of buying and selling. And you remember at the core of everything, just don't be weird. Talk soon. Thanks for listening to Chasing Impact, Not Sales. If this episode sparked something, share it, subscribe, and remember, real sales come from real service. Keep chasing impact.